Okay, welcome everyone, and welcome to this Think and Grow Rich Masterclass. Now, this is something which I've been doing for almost a year now, and this was really come about from a lot of people who I knew, a lot of associates, a lot of people who had been reading a lot of the works from Napoleon Hill, and especially this book, Think and Grow Rich. Now, a lot of people had been reading that book. They really didn't get the full understanding of that book, and a lot of people used to say to me, "Can you explain to me what he means in chapter one? Can you explain to me what he means in specialized knowledge? Can you please explain to me?" So there was a lot of questions what people are asking me, and I really started to understand that people were reading this material, but they weren't really starting to get a really good comprehension of it. So what I decided to do was because I read from this book every single day. I have been for probably the last 5 years. So what I decided to do then was to be able to put together a workshop, put together a program, which was going to help people to understand how powerful this book really is. Because once you can actually start to understand the 13 principles that Napoleon was speaking about this, then you can really start to apply these principles to help you to start to shape and start to define your life. So what this is going to be us coming together over the next 11 weeks. This first week is purely the introduction, so there's not too much for you guys to do. Just sit back and relax. But we're going to be, over the next 11 weeks, we're going to be looking at the 13 chapters of this book. We're going to be looking at them in detail to really start to see what was the idea behind these 13 principles of achievement. Along with that, we're going to be really starting to look at each and everybody's purpose and each and everybody's vision, because there's a lot of people who, sometimes they may not really understand what those two words are, the purpose and your vision. And once you do start to understand what those two words are, you can then really start to live a much more direct, fulfilled and purposeful life. And once you are doing that, you will then start to see all the different areas in your life start to expand and start to improve. So we'll be really looking at those different qualities as well in each and every person who is on this call. At the moment, we've got 3 people with us. What I will be doing shortly is just getting everybody to introduce themselves, so we know who's on the call, so we know who is, just so that we can start to share a little bit of information between us. Hasn't got to be anything too deep at this stage, but just so we can get a general introduction, so we know everyone who's on the call. And then as we then start to go through the weeks, we're all going to start to get to know each other a lot better. Plus, we'll have our Facebook group, which is going to help everybody to interact as well. So I'm using a new system tonight. So I'm just going to see if I can just speak with one person to see whether you guys can hear me okay. Just trying to find out how to introduce, to get you guys onto the mic. Just trying to find out how to get one of you guys on the mic to start speaking. At the moment, we've got Rahun on the line, we've got Christopher, we've got Helen, we've got Vim, and I'm not seeing how I can bring people in to actually start to speak to you guys. So until I find that out, I'm just going to continue with this first session. Okay, well, like I said, really excited to be here. Really excited to have all of you guys together. And we're going to be together for the next 11 weeks. So we're going to really start to get to know each other really well. Now, I've been a life success consultant for the last 3 years now. And life success consultant means that I've been working with and for a gentleman by the name of Bob Proctor. Now, I'm going to be introducing you. Some of you may know Bob Proctor. For the ones of you who don't, I'm going to be introducing who Bob Proctor is and what he is as I go through this first presentation. Now, I've studied this book, and like I said, I read from this book, Think and Grow Rich, almost every day now. I was coached, I was trained, and I was mentored by Bob Proctor. And anybody in the personal development world knows that he's undoubtedly the master of human potentiality. Now, during my training with Bob, he once said to me that I should read from this book every single day if I want personal growth if I want spiritual growth, and if I want intellectual growth. Now, I was very, very aware how much this book had changed Bob's life. So I was very, very willing and prepared to do exactly the same thing. Because I always used to hear the adage, if you do what someone does and you really follow, if you're following someone who has got the type of lifestyle that you lead, if you follow them enough and do the steps, what they do, then you're going to be taken from where you are going towards where they are. Now, I've been reading it every day ever since, along with other classic personal development works from people like Wallace D. Wattles, like James Allen, Dale Carnegie, Thomas Troward, Andrew Carnegie, Earl Nightingale. So there's a lot of people who I do read from, and more up-to-date people. So a lot of those people were from 20, 30, sometimes even older than that. And a lot more up-to-date people, i.e. Darren Hardy, Eric Thomas, Les Brown. Now, this book has had a huge influence on my life, and it continues to do so. So I really hope that during this group and from here on in, that this book is going to have exactly the same type of motivation and effect on your lives as it has on mine over the last 7 years. Now, in this book, this is how Napoleon refers to the mastermind. I'm just going to start to get over to the presentation now. So you should all now be able to see the presentation of this Think and Grow Rich Masterclass. Now, in this book, Napoleon refers to the mastermind. Now, what Napoleon says is the mastermind. He says the mastermind is a coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of harmony between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. He says no two minds ever come together without thereby creating a third invisible, intangible force, which may be likened to a mastermind. When a group of individual minds are coordinated and function in harmony, the increased energy created through that alliance becomes available to every individual in the group. No man, woman can become a permanent success without taking others along with them. Now, this is what Napoleon deemed as the mastermind. So if you can just really start to keep that into your mind as we start to go through, especially this first chapter, and then as we then start to go through the other 11 chapters, you're really going to, because Napoleon is constantly referring back to this term mastermind, and as we start to go through it, you're really going to start to understand what the power of the mastermind is, i.e. when you've got people who are all looking for the same, who've all got the same purpose or the same vision at mind, and they're all talking about a certain topic, and you will start to see how the resonance between everybody in the group will then start to align, and you'll start to see how powerful this concept really, really is. Now, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the history of the book during this first session. Now, the term masterminding, everybody does feel that Napoleon was the first person to coin this term masterminding. But in fact, masterminding came from a gentleman by the name of Andrew Carnegie. Now, Andrew Carnegie was the richest man in the world at the turn of the century. He acquired his wealth through steel. He was one of the greatest steel magnates that ever lived. Now, Andrew Carnegie used to sit down with other leaders of industry, and they used to set themselves goals, and they used to meet to discuss how they were going to actually start to achieve these goals. Now, they clearly understood the principles, what they were using when they were sitting down and talking about these goals, and they knew how they were actually getting the ideas together to be able to help each other to grow and expand their businesses. Now, all of these gentlemen, they were all captains of the industry. They all had very, very big visions, and they all understood the importance of being able to have other people buy into their vision. Now, I'm going to get everybody to introduce themselves soon, just so that we can see who we've got in the group. And during this introductory call, like I said, I'm going to take you through how we're going to be structuring the rest of the calls as we move on. So, just going through the rules of participation and engagement. These calls they're going to last for 11 weeks. We're going to be covering quite a lot of content as we go through these 11 weeks. but all the calls will be at the same time on the same day. So for this group on a Monday, all the calls will be at Monday. They all will be at 7:30 and they'll last about 90 minutes. Sometimes they may go a little bit over. If we're talking about a point which is, we feel is a point that we need to discuss, then maybe we may go 5 or 10 minutes over. I will check with everybody to make sure that's okay before we do go over time. Please do try and log on about 10 minutes beforehand, just so that we can start on time, because we are going to be covering a lot of content, and the more that we can start on time, the better it is for everybody else. We will have a Facebook group, which is going to enable us to be able to share information with everybody. And feel free to post up any information which is relevant to either the chapter which we went over, anything relevant to Napoleon Hill, maybe Andrew Carnegie, anything to do with a purpose, to do with your vision. And as we start to get into the weeks, you may then you'll all be developing your goals. This is a great time to do this this masterclass as well, because it will be going into 2015. By that time we'd be on probably week 4 or 5, but that will be a really great time to then start looking at your own personal goals. We will have all the calls are being recorded as well. This is fantastic. This is something which I had on my last system, but not as good as this system which I'm using now. So all the calls will be recorded. They'll all go straight onto my YouTube channel. So if you ever do want to watch a recording, if you've missed the session, if you want to re-watch the session, because there's going to be things which you probably may not catch the first time, or you want to watch again, then you can get the link. The link will always be posted up in our Facebook group, so you'll always be able to go back and watch the watch any section of the webinar, and that's going to be very, very useful. The slides that I'm going to be doing in each week, I will make these available to you, so will be posting these up. So these are going to be really helpful to be able to go back and look at different points as well. Please do exchange details with each other, because once you start to get to grips with who we've got in the group, you start to understand what other people's visions and their purposes are. You'll probably see that there's an interconnection between you all, and the success of this group is really going to come from the way that everybody connects and helps each other. And again, the last point, the strength of the group is going to really ultimately rely upon the unity of all the individuals within the group. Once you really start to understand that everybody helping each other, and this is that mastermind concept. When you've got 2 people thinking about something, 2 people are better than 1. When you've got 6 people in a group who are working together, that's always going to be better than 1. Sometimes I will be posting up some information that if maybe somebody mentions a particular topic and I've got extra information on that topic, then I will then post that up into the Facebook group so everybody can access that. Now, what is it that we're gonna cover over the 11 weeks? Now, by the end of this masterclass, we would have covered all of the 13 chapters, which Napoleon really clearly breaks down and defines. So you can see that with the different sessions. So session 1 is going to be the introduction to the book. I'm going to be speaking to you about exactly who is Napoleon Hill and Andrew Carnegie, and I'm also going to be letting you know about myself. Some of you know me, some of you don't. But I'll just let you know who I am, what I've been doing most of my career, and then how I've actually now started to. I completely changed my career. For any of you who don't know, I am an architect. I don't practice architecture anymore, but I went through quite a process going from architecture going into what I am now, which is a performance coach. Session 2 is going to be then looking at the author's preface in the introduction. So after this introduction, if you can all now start to get the copy of the book which I've recommended, which is the Tom Butler Bowden version, which is the original classic version. So that's probably the version which is the closest to how the book was actually written. All the newer copies now have a lot of different text. They've changed so they can try to bring it up to modern standards, but I've read quite a lot of the other versions, and I feel that this version is the best version to get. So session 3. So after this session, you'll be reading the author's preface and introduction, and then next week I'll be doing a presentation on those 2 chapters. Session 3 will be chapters 1 and 2, which are desire and faith. Session 4 will be chapters 3 and 4. So because there's 13 chapters, some weeks we'll be looking at 2 chapters. And then as we get to session 6, which will be chapter 7, the decision, then the next week will be persistence, the next week is the power of the mastermind. So we'll be looking at single chapters, and then we'll be going back to double chapters, just so that we can fit it all in within the 11 weeks. Now, what you're going to need for these calls, for this, like I said, for this first call, always make sure you've got pen and paper, because pen and paper, as we start to focus on a subject and you start to talk about it, you will start to notice that you get ideas. And these ideas need to be recorded. A lot of people have ideas come to them during the daytime, during the nighttime. They never have a pen or a paper to be able to note these ideas down. So really do start to get ideas. And what you'll realize is, as we start to focus in on certain subjects, the resonance of the brain power of the people who are in the group on the call, we will start to raise our personal frequencies, and that will enable ideas which we wouldn't have been able to access had we not joined together as a group for this short period of time. So those ideas will be coming to you, because ideas are just floating through the ether, but it just depends on the level that your personal vibration is as to whether you attract those ideas or not. So once you do start to attract ideas, you will notice that you may start to have ideas about things, maybe solutions or challenges that you were thinking about today, challenges you may be thinking about during the week, or maybe it might just be new, fresh ideas. But do make sure that you jot ideas down. Over the 11 weeks, do start to keep your notes in some type of order. So after this first session, you'd have had notes. Just compile it together, maybe in a file, maybe in a ring binder, and just keep those notes together. So at the end of the 11 weeks, you've got 11 sections or 11 pieces of literally pieces of work that you can always refer to. Week by week, I'm going to be asking everybody, once I get the mics working, I'll be asking everybody to share a success from your last 7 days. Now, this does many things. One, it gets people talking, it gets people opening up. And over the weeks, it will get you really starting to have a look at what is it that you're doing on a day-to-day basis that is successful. You'll be starting to build belief within yourself as well, because sometimes people don't think that they've done anything of valor during the day or during the week. But as you're then starting to, because you know that you're going to be sharing a success, that is going to help you to then start to look for the successes that you've had during the week. There's a reading list which you don't have to get the books from. You can, but there'll be a reading list which is on my website. You can see the website there. It's www.rchinds.com, and the reading list is /reading-list. But if you go to that, that's one part of my website which has got a lot of recommended reading, which is all books which I've read, so I can personally vouch for, but they all have connections with these different 13 chapters. Some of them are books by Napoleon Hill, and some of them are books by other leading experts in their field of New Age thought. And probably one of the most important things I'm going to ask you to do is to be present and be in the moment while we're doing these calls. We're not on the calls for long, 90 minutes, but if you can be present, if you can turn off your mobile phones, if you can turn off any social media programs that you've got on, turn off the Twitter, the Facebook, the YouTubes, anything else that you've got. If you keep your phone on, but put it on mute, turn it over so you're not constantly seeing the notifications flash up. And just try to be in the present moment as we're going over some of these concepts, because the more that you can be really tuned in is the benefit that you're really going to start to gain from these groups. Now, during this call, in specificity, we're going to be learning about the history of this book. There's a really great lineage and a history behind this book, and it really comes from the two protagonists, Andrew Carnegie and Dr. Napoleon Hill. I'm going to be doing a really brief summary on each of the chapters, just so that you know what's coming up. For those of you who have read the book, then it's going to be a refresher, but it's also going to be very interesting, because I'm going to be putting up a lot of points which you may never have looked at some of the chapters in the way that I'm going to be presenting them to you. People who haven't read this book, then it's just a great introduction to have to the book, to have some of the things which I'm going to be telling you about the book. I'm going to be letting you know how this book really influenced my life, and how it influenced the life of Bob Proctor as well, who, like I say, I was trained, coached and mentored by. I'm going to be telling you a lot about me and how I actually got involved in this book. and then what you're actually going to be getting from actually studying with this book and with it in this this masterclass. But until we get to that point, the chapters of this book, like I say, there's 13 chapters. There's an author's preface and an introduction. So for next week, I'm going to ask you guys to read the first 2 chapters, and then afterward, at the end of each session, I'll just be letting you know whether it's 1 chapter you're reading or whether it's going to be 2 chapters for the next week. Now, desire, the chapter desire is just really starting, and the first 2 chapters, Napoleon talks about a definite major purpose. Now, a definite major purpose is something that you want. Now, a lot of people in life don't actually know what it is that they want. So once you can start to define what it is that you want, then you can actually start to move towards it. A lot of people are just, they wake up in the morning, they have their breakfast, they may have a full-time job, they go to their job, they do the work that they need to do, they come home, they have something to eat, they may do an after-work activity, they'll come home, they'll watch TV for a bit, they'll go to bed. They'll repeat that for 5 days, and then at the weekend they'll relax because they're away from that place where they have to go for 5 days where they don't usually like going. And then they'll try to find some way of being able to relax, to get away from that what they're doing during the week. Now that's really just surviving. If you can start to define what it is that you want from life, just really start to think about what is your life about, what is it that you want to achieve through your life. That then starts to become your definite major purpose. That will start to become your target in life, where you can then start to, once you've got a target, then you can then start to aim towards something. Chapter 1 is about desire, because once you can then start to define what it is that you want, you can then start to build desire towards it. You can then really start to get yourself into the state where you really want this thing to happen. Faith is, once you've defined what you want and you then start to move towards it, you will then need to start to build up faith. Now, faith is just your way of letting yourself know that you can be moving towards this thing. Even though you don't have it, you will start to build up the belief within you that you will be able to achieve it. Even though you may not know how you're going to do it, but there's ways, and we're going to be going through all of this as we go through the chapters. There's ways of starting able to induce faith into yourself for you to be able to know that you can actually do the thing that you desire for the things that you actually want. Chapter 3 is auto-suggestion. You may or you may not have heard of that term before, but auto-suggestion is really is the way that you influence yourself through your language, through your words. A lot of people, and you'll probably see examples of this all the time, where maybe someone may say, I'm always late, or I have not got a very good memory, I'm always forgetting names. Well, if you start to tell yourself those things, maybe something negative or something positive, after a while, you will start to believe it. So auto-suggestion is just when you are suggesting things to yourself. So it's just really starting to become aware of what it is that you're speaking about. Specialized knowledge is in that chapter, Napoleon is talking about, once you define what it is that you want, you then have to start to be able to build up knowledge in the area or the field over the thing that it is you want. It doesn't necessarily have to be you having the knowledge, because you can then start to tap into people who do have the knowledge. Chapter 5 is imagination. Imagination, we've all got a marvelous tool which is called our minds. Now, everybody's got a mind. Some people do not use their mind in a way which can give them the benefits. Now, imagination is something which is part of your mind. Now, we've got 2 parts of our imagination. We've got our creative imagination and a synthetic imagination. So in that chapter, we'll really start to find out what the difference is between the 2 and how to tap into your creative imagination. Organized planning is then starting to find out how once you start imagining, you will then start to get ideas coming to you. And it's then all about starting to organize those ideas into a plan. Number 7 is about decision. Now, a lot of people in life procrastinate. They don't make a decision. And if you don't make a decision, life will make a decision for you. So this is about you starting to become proactive and you making the decisions. Then there's chapter 8 is about persistence, and persistence is really you should really start to understand, once you come through these chapters, you'll start to see the link in between them. But persistence, you'll start to understand that if you haven't got persistence, then you're not really going to be able to achieve your desires. you're going to have persistence, because you're going to come up against a lot of obstacles as you make your way towards your desire. Then there's the power of the mastermind, which is what we've been discussing so far already. Then you've got the mystery of sex transmutation. And a lot of people see this chapter and they wonder, what is a chapter on sex doing it in a book which is about this? Now, once we get to that chapter, you'll just start to realize that this chapter is all about the sexual energy which everybody creates around their body. And it's one of the most powerful energies that is around us. And once you can start to understand how to use that energy and transmutate it, you'll start to see how there's people in history have managed to use that energy and done some great things. And that is available to all of us. Then you've got the subconscious mind. This is one of my favorite chapters. I really study the mind every day, and you're really starting to understand how powerful our minds are, and all the restrictions and limitations that we have they come from our minds. Chapter 12 is the brain. So we start to go into what is the brain, how the brain how it functions, and the correlation between the brain and the mind. A lot of people there's a confusion between brain and mind, the two separate entities. And then we've got the sixth sense, which is, some people call it a gut instinct, some people call it your intuition, but your sixth sense. Everyone has got something which is almost like a guardian angel, which is and once you learn to tune into that can become very powerful as well. And then you've got the epilogue, which Napoleon, it's almost a chapter on its own, and this is how he defines, he starts to talk about the sixth ghost of fear. So what is it? What is fear? How does fear affect us? How does fear stop us from being able to achieve on what it is that we want to achieve in life? Now, this is the time where I come round to you guys, just so that everybody can start to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about yourselves. You haven't got to be anything too in depth, but just who you are, where are you geographically, whether you're different parts of the world, whether you're in the UK, and anything that you just like to share with us. So I'm just going to go back to see whether I can get everybody in on the mics. I'm still not too sure how I actually start to bring everybody in on this. All right, I'm just flicking around to see if I can get everybody here. And I'm not having too much success at this. I can see everybody on the call, so I can see Rahun, I can see Christopher, I can see Helen, I can see Vim, I can see Irene. But at the moment, I'm just not managing to understand how you bring everybody into the call. So I think for this session, this is probably going to be a one-way until I can find out how we bring someone into the call, and then probably next week is when I'll get everybody to do an introduction. Just going to have one more look around the system to find out whether I can do this. So apologies for this. I hope everybody can see the screen, and I hope everybody can see the slides moving. And I'm just going to type something in the chat window just to make sure, and just if somebody can just type back to say that they can see, they can hear me okay. Okay, so I've just typed something in the chat window, and if someone could just respond by just typing back whether they can see this. And that will make sure that I know that everybody is able to see. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come back. So I'm going to assume that everybody is seeing the slides okay. Okay, I'll continue. Okay, so what we'll do is next week, once I get fully cognizant with this system, I can get everybody then to share who they are, and then we can really start to get to know everybody from there. So apologies about that, everyone. Now I'm just going to start to move on, and I'm going to start to, I did speak about purpose and vision, so I'm just going to start to talk a little bit about purpose and vision, because when a few years ago I didn't know what, if someone had said to me about define my purpose vision, I would not have known what they would have been talking about. So we're really starting to look at what is a purpose and what is a vision. Now everybody has a purpose, everybody has something that we are here for. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and we all are unique. We've all got something about us that what you will not find in another individual. And once you can really start to understand and express that, this is when you can really start to live a purposeful life. Now, like I said, we're all unique, and our job being here is really starting to discover what our purpose is and then express it. Share it with your family, share it with your partner, share it with your neighbor, share it with your community. But once you do start to share it, that is when you then start to help other people's lives. You can start to enrich other people's lives. Now, some people may discover their purpose, and some people may actually grow into their purpose. So there's a very, very strange difference. Some people, like I say, some people will be seeking their purpose all the time, where other people won't be seeking it. They won't know about their purpose, but they then just slowly grow into it. Now, why would somebody want to live a purposeful life? Now, everybody should be working on their purpose. You may never have thought about it before, but now that you do know about it, now that you are more aware of what your purpose is or what your purpose is, do start to think about it. Do start to like cast some thought about it. Do maybe spend 5 or 10 minutes a day just starting to think, why do you think you're here? What purpose do you think you're serving? That might come quite clear to you. You may ask yourself that question and nothing comes out, and that's okay. All it is now is that you've asked a question, so now you will now start to create that awareness around you. You're starting to become more aware of it. So the more that you put when you start to pay attention to something, energy will then start to flow to you, and that will then start to help that to increase and expand. Now, the purpose of this book, of Think and Grow Rich, is really to convey a great universal truth through which all people who are ready to learn will learn and will know how to learn. And the two main points you're going to get from this book is what you're going to be possible, what you're going to be capable of doing, and actually how to do it. Now, when I start to look at my purpose, it's taken me a while for me to discover my purpose. I went through my whole career in architecture not really just knowing what my purpose was, and it wasn't until I was coming towards the end of my career in architecture that I then actually started to discover what my purpose was. Now, my purpose is to help people to discover their purpose, to seek and work their passion, to create and fulfill their vision, and become the best version of themselves through achieving worthy goals. So that's what I now know that I am here to do. I didn't know that while I had my career in architecture, but it's since during my last 2 or 3 years towards the end of my career, that's when I then started to understand why I'm here. And then I followed a career which then allowed me to be able to express that. Now, I didn't have many role models while I was growing up, when I was younger. I came from a very, very humble background. And the role models that I had were just sports people, people off TV, people like Muhammad Ali, people like Bruce Lee, Michael Jordan, Malcolm X. These are the people who I looked up to, and I used to just read their autobiographies. But I didn't really, there was no one in my family who had any real great level of success. So there wasn't someone who I could really start to use as a mentor as I was growing up. And that's what I understand that a lot of people don't have now. And this is how I have now started to dedicate my life to help people to do that. Now, when you start thinking about your vision, this is the next thing that I'd like you to start to think about. Now, what is it that you'd all want to achieve from life? Now, ask yourself that question. It may seem like a big question, but once you ask yourself that question, that's when you will then start to, you may never have thought about it before, but asking yourself that question will then cause you to think, and then that will then cause you to then make a shift in your life, and that will then, even if you don't really know what it is that you would like to achieve. But then maybe after asking that question, you will then start to look at other people and see what's their vision. Some people, you can clearly see what their vision is, and they start to work towards it. But that will, once you put energy somewhere, it will then start to expand. So you may not know yet, you may have an inkling of an idea, but whatever it is, the size of it is irrelevant. Some people will think, well, this is what I really would like to do, but I have no idea how I would ever achieve that. And that's irrelevant. Don't let the size of something scare you. It's just starting to get the seeds of what it is that you do want to do. And then with those seeds, all you're doing then is just watering those seeds, exposing it to the right environment, and they will then grow and nourish. You will find the people who will come into your life, the tools and the resources will come into your life to help you to attain what it is that you've got as your vision. So don't even consider the steps of how you're going to achieve this vision, as this is really not your concern. Just start to think about and just start to build that vision of what it is that you'd like to achieve. So when I really didn't have a vision coming through my life. I did know that I wanted to be an architect. I did know that I wanted to design buildings and just help people to become happy in the space where they were living or working or visiting. I knew that was something that I really was keen on. But like I say, as I started to discover my purpose, that then helped me to then start to think about what is it that I want to leave behind? What type of legacy did I want to create? Now, my personal vision is to create global academies that mentor young people to develop their entrepreneurial desire. And I want to do this by submerging them into a nurturing environment of positivity that is conducive for their growth and that focuses on transforming them into leaders. Now, like I say, when I was growing up, I didn't really have anybody around me who acted as a role model for me to get that real positive structure around me. So I know it can be very difficult from some of the things that people learn in school. There's things that we're not taught in school, which once you get out into the real world, you do need to develop skills. And I just want to be able to create some type of academy establishment where people can go there and learn the principles that I've learned since I've started to discover my vision and purpose, but give those skills to people at a much younger age so they can then start to affect their life and they can affect the lives of other people around them. Because once you start to change your life, you will start to see how the life of the other people around you start to change as well. It can be a miraculous transformation that you can take yourself through, and that you can see other people who will look at you as an example, and they will then start to change their lives. You may never know how much by you changing yourself, how much you've affected someone else and how much you've helped them to change their lives as well. So I'm going to start to now go into the lineage behind this book, the real rich history behind this book. Now, this book has really started to travel through time. And this book was commissioned by a gentleman by the name of Andrew Carnegie. You can see that top image on the left-hand side there. Now, he was, like as I said, he was the richest man at the turn of the century, and he just wanted to have some type of literature, a success Bible, if you want to call it, for want of a better word. And he wanted this to be accessible to everyone. Now, he looked for someone who could be able to put this work together, and he found a gentleman by the name of Napoleon Hill, who was a young reporter then. Napoleon Hill did the research for it, and he published the book. The book took 25 years to get the research together. Then the book was published in 1937. From there, a gentleman by the name of Earl Nightingale, he really started to take ownership of this book, and he read this book, implemented the ideas from this book, and started to make himself into a phenomenal success. He then really he became a mentor to Napoleon Hill. Then the next person who really started to take this book and started to implement the principles was a gentleman by the name of Bob Proctor. Bob Proctor picked up was given this book by a gentleman by the name of Ray Stanford when he was 26 years old. And when he took this book, he didn't have much ambition. He was broke. He was always sick. He wasn't very happy. Started to read this book, and his life started to change. And then from there, this, like I say, this book has just come through the different channels. Many people some people you may know now, people like Anthony Robbins, other really well-known successful people have now accredited a lot of their success to this book. Now, this book today, Napoleon left us in 1970, and up until the time of his death, this book had sold 20 million copies. And between 1970 and now, 2014, it has sold another 50 million copies. So the book has sold 70 million copies. So it is one of the most sold books that has ever been written. So as we go through the 11 weeks, you're really going to start to see why this book has got the acclaim that it has. Now, one of the gentlemen who I just mentioned in that lineage is a guy by the name of Bob Proctor. Some of you may on the call, you may know him, and some of you may not know him. But as we go through this, I'll start to give you a lot more information on Bob. Now, Bob is probably one of the most fervent students of this book. And now Bob's been reading this book for the last 52 years, and he's been reading this book every day for the last 52 years, which is quite a phenomenal feat to be reading it. The book completely transformed and revolutionized Bob's life. Like I said, his life was going nowhere, and at 26 years old, he was working in the city of Toronto for the fire department. And it was a steady job. It was a government job, so it was a steady job. If you managed to stay in that job, you didn't do anything wrong. It was a job for life. Now, like I said, he wasn't happy. He was always sick, and he was always broke. He was in a lot of debt because all he was doing was he was earning a certain amount of money. He was spending the money. He wasn't managing his money. He didn't have any financial knowledge, and he just started to build up a lot of debt. He was earning 4,000 Canadian dollars a year, and he was 6,000 Canadian dollars in debt. So for him to be able to get out of debt, he would have to have saved his money, all of his money from his job for a year and a half without spending anything, because he was earning 4,000 a year and he was 6,000 in debt. So he was in a position where he was very heavily strapped in debt. His life wasn't going anywhere. At 26 years old, he wasn't in a very good position. Now, a gentleman who he associated with, a guy by the name of Ray Stanford, he saw something in Bob that Bob didn't see in himself. And he handed him a copy of this book, Think and Grow Rich. And he said to him, look, Bob, you need help. Obviously, your way, whatever you're doing, isn't working. So why don't you try this? And he gave the book to Bob. He said to Bob, read the book and just do exactly as this book tells you to do. There's a lot of instructions in the book, and just follow the book and just see what happens, because if not, you're already on a road to destruction. You're already going there. So why don't you just try to do something to make a difference? Now, Bob was a bit dismissive at first. He didn't want to take advice from this person who hardly knew him, and he decided he had absolutely nothing to lose. So he started to read this book. He started to take on board the information that was in the book, and he started to internalize the information. Now, when you're reading something, there's two ways to read material. You can either read it and just surface read it, where you're getting a comprehension of it, but you're not doing anything with that comprehension, with that knowledge. Or you can internalize it. Now, internalize it is where you more study the book. So you're getting the comprehension of it, but then you're looking at the ideas which are in the book, and then you're starting to see how you can apply some of those ideas into your daily life. That's when you then start to implement the ideas. So that's what Bob started to do. He started to internalize that information. And as he did, he started to see that special little things were starting to happen within his life. He could see that he was starting to become a little bit luckier in his life, for want of a better word. He was feeling a lot better within himself, and he was coming a lot more motivated, because before he really didn't feel motivated to go to work. He didn't feel motivated to do anything, because he was just in debt. He was always sick, and he wasn't very happy. But he started to see that his belief in himself to do things was starting to grow, and he was starting to increase. Now, all he was doing was reading the book, taking a heed of what the book was telling him to do, and he was telling other people about it. So there were these people who had never seen Bob read a book before, and now they were seeing him with this book that he couldn't put down. And not only could he not put the book down, but he was telling people how good this book was, what he was doing. And some of the people were looking at him like he was a bit crazy, because they just started to think, well, how come this kid is now starting to read books and tell us what we should be doing when this guy is in such a state himself? But he then started to see things which were happening. He started to get more of a purpose to his life. He then started to think about what it was that he wanted. He then started to define things in his life, and he then started to follow the process which is in the book. Well, within 1 year, his earnings went from 4,000 Canadian dollars to 174,000 Canadian dollars. And then within the next 2 years, he then took his earnings to over $1 million. He never really understood what happened. He just knew that it had happened. And what had happened was that while he was working with the fire department, he started to get ideas that he could start his own business. And then he started his own business in a office cleaning. Because working for the fire department, he was working 3 days on, 3 days off, 3 days on, 3 days off. So what was happening was he was starting to get information from the book, and he then started to apply that. He then started up a office cleaning business, which then started to become very popular. He opened up another office and quickly opened up offices around Canada and then into the United States. And within 2 years, he took his income over $1 million. Now, what had happened was he had set himself a goal with the information that he had learned from the book. He followed the 6 steps that we're going to be looking at in chapter 1, in Desire, and he gave himself a goal of earning 25,000 Canadian dollars. He didn't even know anybody who earned 25,000 Canadian dollars. His boss didn't even earn that at the fire brigade. But that's the goal that he set himself to earn. Gave himself 10 years to do it. This was in 1961. He gave himself till 1971 to do it. Now, he did it well before the 10 years by following the principles which are laid out in the book that you're now going to have in your hands, which we're going to be studying. Now, Bob then went on to build himself a company which is called Life Success. The company is now rebranded last year, and it's now called Procter Gallagher. But this company now operates in over 90 countries worldwide, and he built his company by using the principles which are in that book. So you can start to see how his life was completely transformed by this book. And this is the person who I chose to then want to get under his wing. I saw how much this had changed his life. And I actually saw Bob Proctor in a film which is called The Secret. Some of you may know about that film. I'll be talking a little bit more about The Secret. But I actually saw that film, The Secret, saw what they were speaking about. And that's what then sparked an interest in me. Now, I came across The Secret. I think The Secret came out in 2005, 2006, and I actually came across it in 2009. I just remember I was working as an architect at this stage. I just finished a 3.5-year project in Jamaica, where I was the project architect on the national airport in Jamaica. I had just completed the project. It was £70 million worth of project. Nobody thought that I had the experience or the knowledge to be able to be selected as a project architect, but I did. And I was one of the youngest architects to ever be in a role like that on a project that size. Now, when I commenced the airport in Jamaica, this is the airport, North Manley International Airport. I was told when I was actually on the project in the London office working on this project, I was told that I was too young to be the project architect. I was told that I didn't have enough experience. I didn't have enough knowledge. But I did manage to get myself to the position of being the project architect, and I did complete an amazing job. Now, one thing that I had was in that time was an abundance of desire, because I used to tell myself that I am going to be the one who's going to be going from England to Jamaica looking after this project, even though everybody told me there was no way it was going to happen. Now, what I didn't realize at the time, and what I wouldn't come to realize until I discovered this book, that I was implementing a lot of principles which are in Think and Grow Rich, but I knew nothing about. I wasn't doing that consciously. So I had started with a burning desire and a clear, definite purpose of me wanting to do this project. The reason why this project was so special to me is because my parents are from Jamaica. My mum left Jamaica in 1960. My dad left in 1959. They had both never been back. So I had started at this architect's job, at this architect's company, found out they were doing the Jamaica project, and I just said to myself, that would be a fantastic job for me to do, knowing that that's where my parents came from, and to be able to leave a legacy there. So I had a really strong desire to be able to become the architect for it, even though I had no idea how I was going to do it. I expressed a ton of faith, which is the next chapter in the book, chapter 2, where Napoleon really starts to talk about how to induce faith. I started to induce faith within myself. I didn't know how I was doing it, but I was doing it. They say, there's a saying, a small amount of faith, faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. And once you start to realize how you induce faith, you'll be able to see very, very clearly how you can do that. Over the 4 years that I worked on the project, 3 years I worked on the project in the office before it went to site, I was always giving myself auto suggestions. I was always talking to myself, almost pretending like I was already the project architect, and always talking to myself of what it would be like to experience to be the architect in Jamaica on the one doing the job. Specialized knowledge is one of the chapters in the book. Now, what I did, I sought specialized knowledge to help me with the parts of the project that I didn't know about. In the office, I was looking after, the building is split up into different packages. So there would be the cladding package, the roof package, the tiles, the check-in desks, the baggage belt, and I was given a few packages. But what I would do in my spare time was look at all of the other packages of the project to just get more knowledge. I was talking to people who were very specialized in what they were doing, so I could be able to find out how things went together with the baggage belt, which I knew nothing about, how things went together with the loading bridges. So when you walk off the plane, that glass link that takes you from the plane to the building. And that's what I was doing. I was putting myself around people who knew more than me, and I was downloading that knowledge to me. The next chapter is imagination. I really started to use my imagination as I used to come home from work from London and just imagine myself in Jamaica. So I was starting to see myself in my mind's eye already in Jamaica doing this project. And then persistence, which is chapter 8, I displayed a huge amount of persistence with this because I just kept going on thinking it was me going to be doing that, really starting to put everything into the day that I was working during the office. And then I started to use my sixth sense, because while working on the project, I then started to sense I should be doing certain things, I should be talking to certain people, and they would just come to me as a hunch or an inspired thought, but I would follow it. Later, I was then really found out in the book that is another principle which was in the book. So before I even knew about this book, I had been applying a lot of these lessons and directing it towards my definite purpose, and that's what we're really going to start to look at. Now, at that time, it was, like I said, it was the most prestigious project that I had done in my career, and I was just very, very grateful to be on that project. Now, what I do now is very different. I retired from architecture in the end of 2010, and then what I actually do now, I don't practice that. Like I said, I was involved in architecture for 11 years. But now what I do is I'm now a performance coach. So I do business coaching and I do personal coaching. And this has started to, as I became a coach, this started to lead me down several paths. So for the last, almost the last 2 years now, I've been involved with a home business, which is called Vima. I've become one of the most highest ranked Vima members in the UK. And that is using the principles from this book, applying it to my business, and that's how I've managed to build my Vima business to what it is today. The business operates in over 16, 17 countries, and that still continues to grow today. And my coaching business, I coach individuals to discover and work with their passion and really assist people in becoming the best version of themselves. Now, I've gone over what my purpose and my vision are. My purpose is to help people to become the best versions of themselves, and my vision is to really start to develop these entrepreneurial schools, which I really now started to get a hold of. I didn't know how I was going to do this, but now I've started to meet the people who are now starting to help me to be able to put that together. So as long as you've got that definite purpose, you don't need to know how you're going to get things done. you just need to keep focusing on that, and then by applying principles, you will then start to bring these things towards you, of the people, the tools, the resources that you will need to get these things achieved. Now, when I came back from Jamaica in 2009, like I said, I did watch a film called The Secret. If you haven't watched a film called The Secret or heard of it, do get the book or do get the DVD, but do watch that, because that's got a really strong connection to everything what we're going to be studying in this book. Now, I did watch that, and I was really fascinated in that film from what the people were speaking about, because they were talking about intangible laws. Now, these are the things which I'd have been thinking about for quite a lot of my life. I'd never really spoken to people about it because I didn't think anybody would take me seriously, because I used to believe in the invisible. Now, and saying that to someone while you were growing up, it just wasn't the thing to say to people, because they just didn't really, I wouldn't have thought I'd have been taken seriously. But I used to think about invisible laws, things like gravity. Gravity, you cannot see it, you cannot smell it, taste it, touch it, feel it, but gravity is there. Gravity is what keeps us walking on this planet. If you were to drop something, hold out a pen and let go of it, gravity says or states that anything heavier than air will be brought down towards the center of the earth. And that's exactly what happens. It will pull, the gravitational pull will pull something down towards the center of the earth. Now, we don't know what gravity is, but we live our life in accordance to it. Nobody is going to walk out of a first floor window because you know that you're going to hurt yourself. But this is gravity was pulling you down. So there are other laws which we can't see or taste or touch or feel or smell. Things like gratitude, things like love, those are very powerful forces, but they do exist. And once you start to put yourself in accordance with these really powerful laws, with these really powerful forces, you will start to see that your life takes a completely different route. Now, as I started to get a grasp on these concepts, I started to look back on my life, and I started to I had to travel 4 hours every day to get to work, 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours to get back. And I started to read about these concepts. I started to take all the music off my iPad and I started to put on audiobooks. And these audiobooks were different books which were just talking about these invisible laws, which I've just been discussing. Now, I used to read these books, I used to listen to these audios, and I just used to listen to them over and over again, because the things I started to hear in them were just really starting to make a connection with how I then started to become very successful as an architect at such a young age. Now, when I start to go back a little bit further in my life, like I said, I came up from a very humble background. No one in my family had achieved any level of success which somebody would describe as successful now. I did have a few setbacks while I was young. I did have I did a lot of health challenges. But one thing I did, I grew in a very supportive household. And like I said, I did always believe that impossible things were possible. Now, some of the influences that I had on my life as I was growing up, I had my mind set on becoming an architect from about the age of 7. This really started to become apparent because I grew up in a place called Croydon, which is in South London, and in Croydon at the time that I was growing up, it was a place where all the headquarters for big multinational companies were building their new headquarters. And you can see that image on the left. Croydon was known as Little Manhattan because it had so many skyscrapers. So when I was going to school in the morning, I always used to be surrounded by all of these new buildings. You can see the East Croydon station on the right. It used to be a Victorian building, and then they knocked that down and they built this contemporary architectural building. So I was always surrounded by these modern pieces of architecture, and they started to have a massive influence on my life, which I didn't know at the time. The other thing, I would always be sketching, and from the age of about 7, I always used to have a sketchbook, which I used to be sketching different buildings or different things of anything to do with contemporary design. Now, the other thing that I had a really powerful influence in my life were aeroplanes. I didn't used to draw or sketch aeroplanes, but I just used to be fascinated by how something so big could go up in the sky, so heavy, so powerful, have so many people on board and stay up in the air and then land at its destination. And I used to have loads of model toys. I used to be watching videos on airplanes, but it was those two things. It was the buildings, modern buildings, and aeroplanes that I used to completely submerge my mind with. Now, not knowing at the time about the subconscious mind and how it works, what I was doing was starting to impress my mind with those two things. 20 years later is then when I became an airport architect. So I didn't know the significance of it then until I started studying this material. But what I had been doing, I had been giving myself a very, very strong influence with the planes, with the modern architecture. And it was really, I'd started to shape the direction of my life then, but unconsciously. And this is what so many people do, whether it be in a positive sense or whether it be in a negative sense, but you impress your mind with images, with thoughts, with feelings, which will then take you towards a destination. Now, the real day that I got the real shift happened in my life was after I had read The Secret and I started to read all these books. I then heard that Bob Proctor, who the person I had been studying for the last 2 years, was coming over to Italy to do a weekend seminar. Now, after finding out that he was coming, I bought a ticket to go and see him. To see him live was something which was just pretty extraordinary after having studied him for the last 2 years. But having studied his material, it helped me to improve my attitude. It got me 2 huge pay increases at work. It had got me to the stage where I was doing very, very well at work. But I then started to set myself a goal, which I just thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I said that I actually wanted to work with Bob Proctor. I knew that that would involve having to leave architecture, so I didn't really know how I was going to be doing that, but that's the goal that I set myself. Now, what I did over the next 6 months was I did leave architecture. I did find out how I needed to go to Miami to be trained by Bob, and I did actually go over there, and that led me to then train with Bob and then subsequently work with Bob, doing seminars, doing trainings, and then working for his company, implementing his material. So that from the day that I made the decision to the day that I was then working with him almost on a full-time basis was probably about 18 months to 2 years. And that happened very, very fast. I can hardly believe how it happened. But from being in architecture for 20 years and then completely changing my career and my life direction. Of course, I had the opinions of people around me, family and friends, telling me that I shouldn't be leaving architecture. It wasn't safe to be doing that. I had a safe, secure job. I had a profession. It was suicidal to leave what I was doing. We did have quite a large mortgage, but I had started to listen to what was coming from the inside of me, and it was telling me that I should be following. And this was my purpose coming through. I started to listen to the truth which was coming. As you start to study this material, you will then start to be able to become a lot more intuitive, and you will start to hear the things, the truth, which then starts to coming out from you, because you'll then start to able to block out the noise, and you will start to be able to then set yourself a goal of what it is that you truly want, and then start to work towards it. So what you're actually going to gain from studying a book like this. Now, what you're going to do is you're really going to start to gain an insight into the creative process. Now, the creative process is really the process which we use as human beings to actually start to bring things into manifestation into our life. You may have heard the phrase, we become what you think about. Everybody's probably heard you are what you eat. Some of you may have heard of another phrase, we become what we think about. So whatever it is that we do, our minds are very, very powerful, and what it is that we do think about has a profound effect upon what it is that we will then actually start to see and believe and do and act upon in our lives. Then this is the creative process. When you start to think about something, that will then start to cause a feeling. That feeling then starts to affect the vibration that we're all in. All of us are in a level of vibration. And the more that if you are in a positive frame of mind, the higher that vibration. If you're in a negative frame of mind, that vibration will be lowered, and it'll be a lower vibration. A low vibration will attract to it low vibrational things. A high vibration will attract high vibration things. And this is the creative process. We're really going to start to go into this a lot more as we go through the chapters, because you're going to really start to see how this is broken down. I don't know how many people have actually, like I say, have read from this book before, but it's really irrelevant whether you've read from it or not. If you had read from it, it will just give you I will give you a different way of looking at it. And if you haven't read from it, it's just going to be a really great introduction into it. It is the formula for personal success when you start to implement this material. You know, you're going to become part of an amazing group everybody who's on this call now has made the conscious decision to be here, to support each other in each other's personal development. And what you'll find through the study of this is that you will then it's going to start to become very apparent to you over the next couple of weeks where the negativity comes from in your life. And you will be able to start to really become aware of that, and you will be able to start to flush some of that negativity away from your life. And as you do that, you can then choose to then replace that with positive things. And the more positive things that you can have in your life, people, situations, and thoughts, it is just going to bring more of the same to you. And as you do that, you will then start to bring more, that your life will then start to increase. Now, just through the fact of reading this book, we've got a lot of accountability happening through this group, because as you just being in this group, we're going to be going over a subsequent chapter each week. And that will help you to actually read the book in your own time, because you know that the next week we'll be going on to a different chapter. So really, it will help you to keep up, because some people start this book but they never finish it. But being in a group like this, knowing that the next week we'll be on the next chapter, that will help you. That will give you the motivation to finish a chapter each week, sometimes 2 chapters. Now, the biggest fallback that I see what happens with people when they're following their goals is that they don't have a consistent support group from positive people. Now, you may not realize who you are surrounded by, but if you aren't taking on new ideas or new concepts, then your mind will have a tendency just to regurgitate and replay old ideas. You won't be thinking creatively. So just like I said at the beginning of the call, a lot of people are just following a habit pattern. They're waking up in the morning, they're having breakfast, they're going to a place where they call work, they're doing 9 hours work, maybe 10 hours work there, they're coming home, they might be going to the gym, they might be doing an after work activity, then they'll get home, have something to eat, and they'll just repeat that 5 times a week. And then the 2 days which they're not at work, they'll do something to escape, but they're not actually starting to progress their life or put themselves on a direction where they want to head to and what they want to create with their life. Once you start to change that and you start to take on board new ideas, start to realize what it is that you want to do, that's when you can then start to see your life start to expand. And you'll, like I said, you'll see where the negative energy is coming from in your life. Now, a lot of people they'll have worries, they'll have doubts, and they'll have fears. Everybody does have those. But now, starting to understand this book, you'll start to have a deeper understanding of how fears are caused, that they come from worry, they come from doubt. So if you can then start to stave off worry, it won't turn into doubt and it won't turn into fear, which then paralyzes people from doing things which they want to do, but they don't do it. So from this group, you're definitely going to gain support. You're going to have a new funnel of positivity to feed from, which is really important for your mental growth, and not only for your mental growth, but also for your spiritual growth as well. So now you're going to be reading from something which is going to really start to benefit you hugely. Now, Napoleon analyzed 25,000 people to compile this book. 25,000 people, successful people and people who didn't achieve success. So all of this knowledge is now going to be downloaded to you. That is within the pages, within the words on the pages of this book, is that the 25,000 people have been analyzed. So this is the advantage of reading something like this, because all these people were interviewed, and some of the people who were interviewed in this book contains 500 of the most successful people up until the time of this book being published. And people who were interviewed include the likes of Henry Ford, Charles Schwab, Theodore Roosevelt, who's one of the main American presidents, Woodrow Wilson, Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, who developed this telephone, John D. Rockefeller, Thomas Edison, who came up with the light bulb with the electric filament. Now, a lot of these individuals did not have a lot of schooling, so it's not like they had educational intelligence, and some didn't even make it to higher education. So it's not that you need to have an intellect to be able to do things of great recognition in life. Now, as you start to read through this book, you're going to start to see that Napoleon is always referring to a secret which is locked within the pages of this book. Now, what he says is, if you're ready to receive it, you already possess half of it. So when you start to read through this book, as you start to go through the chapters, do read this book with an open mind, because you're going to start to hear completely new concepts that you may never have been exposed to before, and that may seem quite strange. Anybody who is probably got their own business will probably have done something to do with mindset training, whether they've done a personal development course or they've read books on personal development. So maybe I'm talking to people who have got quite an open mind on this call now, but however open your mind is, at the end of these calls, every session, your mind is going to be opened and expanded even further. So like I say, do read the book with an open mind. There's going to be a lot of different techniques which are going to be explained in the book. And just rest assured that a lot of the ideas that come from this book are coming from people who have had great success throughout the time. Now, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about the two protagonists, Andrew Carnegie and Napoleon Hill. Now, Andrew Carnegie was born 25th of November, which is tomorrow actually, in 1835. And he passed on the 11th of August 1919. He was 84 years when he passed. He was a Scottish industrialist. He was a businessman. He was an entrepreneur, and he was a major philanthropist. He was an immigrant as a child and with his parents. And in the 1870s, when he was around 35 years old, he founded the Carnegie Steel Company. And by the 1890s, 20 years later, this company was the largest and most profitable industrial enterprise in the world. Now, he devoted the latter part of his life to large-scale philanthropy with a real special emphasis on local businesses, on world peace, on education, and especially on scientific research. So what he did, he spent half of his life amassing his wealth, and he spent the second half of his life giving it away, creating foundations. He built schools, he built libraries, he built the Carnegie Music Hall in New York, Carnegie Library. He just donated a hell of a lot of money back into the community. Now, what he developed a philosophy, and he used to say that any idea that is held in the mind, that is emphasized, that is either feared or revered, will begin at once to clothe itself in the most convenient and appropriate physical form that is available. So this is what he believed, how he started to really start to get his business, his company, to how it was. Now, he felt that it was a travesty for him to create so much wealth and then go to his grave not letting people know how he did it. So what he did, he decided that he was going to seek someone who could help him to put together a book which was going to contain all the laws of achievement. He found a young reporter by the name of Napoleon Hill. He had a 3-hour interview with him at his office, which was in Fifth Avenue in New York. And after 3 hours of interviewing with Napoleon, he really liked Napoleon. He could see that Napoleon was a smart guy, and he invited it up to his New York home, which was upper state New York, for the weekend. Now, at the end of the weekend, after having talking about business, talking about what he wanted to do, he sat him down and he asked him a question, and he said all he wants is a yes or a no answer. He asked Napoleon if he would conduct a study of success for him, and would he compile it into either a manuscript or some type of organization, but it was going to be a philosophy of individual achievement. He said he was not going to pay him any money for it. He's not going to give him a salary. He's not going to give him any bonuses. He would have to fund the project himself, and it was probably going to take him 20 years to do it. Now, Napoleon is sitting on the other side of his desk, and Napoleon is thinking to himself, 20 years to work to do a job that I'm not going to be paid for. Now, unbeknown to Napoleon, Andrew Carnegie had asked that question, and he had given Napoleon 30 seconds to answer. If Napoleon had not replied within that 30 seconds, then he was going to withdraw the offer from him after spending the whole weekend with him. Then Napoleon really started to think to himself. He said, okay, I'm not going to be paid any money for this. This was originally a 3-hour interview. It then turned into this richest man in the world inviting me up to his mansion to spend the whole weekend. So this man obviously can obviously see potential in me, and he's asking me to do something which I'm not going to get paid for, but I think I would like to do this. I can do this. And Napoleon said yes. He said he would do it. Now, Andrew never let him know that at the time, but he had a stopwatch under the desk. And like I say, he had given him 30 seconds to answer. He had given him 1 minute to answer, and Napoleon answered in 25 seconds. If he hadn't had answered within 1 minute, Andrew said that he was going to withdraw the offer. So he told Hill that what he would do for him, he would give him introductions to all of his wealthy friends, and he would then be able to conduct at-length interviews with these people to then find out what it was that they did in their careers to make them so successful. He knew that it was going to be a very, very tough job. And what he did, he knew that at times Napoleon was going to feel like quitting. So what he did, he gave him an affirmation. What he said to Napoleon, that he wanted him to read out to himself every day, as many times as he could for the day. And this would help him through the times where he wanted to give up. And this is auto-suggestion, what he talks about in chapter 4. Now, what the affirmation that Andrew Carnegie gave to Napoleon Hill was this. He wanted Napoleon to say every day, looking in the mirror, Andrew Carnegie, I'm not only going to match your achievements in life, I'm going to challenge you at the post and pass you at the grandstand. Andrew Carnegie, I'm not only going to match your achievements in life, I'm going to challenge you at the post and pass you at the grandstand. So that's what Andrew Carnegie wanted Napoleon to say to himself as many times as he could every day. And he knew that he would, by doing this, he would then start to induce belief into himself. He wouldn't believe it at first, but Andrew really knew how the mind worked. Napoleon didn't at that stage. Now remember, Napoleon was a struggling reporter at this time, and he had the richest man in the world asking him to commit to reading this in front of the mirror. Now, when he did start doing this, he was living with his brother, and Napoleon used to go in the bathroom, look in front of the mirror, and he used to whisper it to himself because he didn't want his brother listening or hearing him say this ridiculous sentence, what this man had told him to read. Now, after a while, Napoleon got more and more confident reading that affirmation, and he used to read it all the time to himself. He memorized it so he didn't have to keep taking out the piece of paper, and he then started to believe that he could actually do this 20-year job. Now, eventually, the book, the studying and the compilation of the book took him 25 years. Andrew Carnegie created 53 millionaires in his lifetime. And through the work of this Napoleon Hill and his book and his teachings, he has created many, many more. Napoleon Hill turned himself into a multi-millionaire through the works from this. So like I say, it took him 25 years. He interviewed over 500 of the world's most successful people, and he analyzed over 25,000 people. Now, the first version of this book was withdrawn after the book was given to Henry Ford to look over the book to see what he thought about it. Henry Ford looked at the book and he said, this book is completely too powerful to make as a public distribution. So he said to Napoleon, you're going to have to take it back and you're going to have to water it down. After it was revised and then got the go-ahead, the version that we have now is the second edition. It's not the original version. So if anybody does hear of the original version, please do let me know, because I'd be very interested to know what was been taken out of it. But it's like I say, it's just a phenomenal book for us to be able to have the opportunity to be reading and studying together. And I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of the things which Bob shared with me about the book. There's a lot of the things which I didn't really understand at first, but after having read the book, like I say, I read from it almost every day, and also having the advantage of having Bob tell me many bits of tips about this book, and that all I'm going to be doing is passing that on and sharing that with you guys. So I've come to the end of the first session. I hope you've all enjoyed that. Really apologies about not being able to get the sound in so I can speak to you guys. I am going to find out how to, like I say, this is a system which is new to me. I usually use another platform called GoToWebinar, but this Webinar Jam is much better, and it will prove its worth once I'm able to get you in all on the call. But once I get you on the call, I will next week at the start of the call, I'll just get you all in one by one so you can introduce yourselves, and you can then just start to give maybe just a couple of minutes introduction of who you are, where you are, and anything interesting that you may be working on, or anything interesting that you'd want to share with the rest of the group. What I would ask you all to do is please do now get yourself a copy of the book. I'll be posting up a link to my website so you can see the version of the book. Everybody should have had a link sent to you which has got the book. Feel free to get the audio of the book if you learn better by listening. You don't have to get a book. I always find a book better because you can highlight stuff, you can note stuff, you can write in the book as well. Some people learn better by listening, some people learn better by watching. You can also get the book, if you go on YouTube, you'll be able to see Napoleon talking about each of these individual chapters. I will be posting up some of those as we go through the weeks. I have got the Facebook group. I think you are looking at the names who are here, you are all in the Facebook group, so I will be posting up things in there. So just you will get a notification every time someone posts in the group, so do keep an eye on there. After this session, I will be posting up the slides from this session as well, and like I said, the recording for this will go straight onto my YouTube channel, so I'll be putting the link on there. This is where I would usually get everybody to share a success, but because I can't get to speak to you guys, I won't be doing that just yet. But sharing a success really helps you to start to get belief as well, because you'll be hearing the success of other people in the group, and as well that's really good when you start to be able to celebrate the success of others. That makes it easier for you to find the successes that you've had. So you're really going to start to see how this mastermind concept works. So next week, after having read the introduction and the preface, you're really going to start to understand what it is this definiteness of purpose. But Napoleon says here, it is the starting point of all achievement. So before you start to achieve major things in your life, you have to have a definiteness of purpose. Without that, you're just really, you're not following that creative process. But we're going to really start to see how we start to define our purpose. At the end of each session, I'm just going to give you some really simple tips on how you can start to implement some of the information which is in the chapter, and will then starting to be related to your life. So there will be a tip of the week as we wrap up each of the chapters. Please do get familiar with my website. The website is www.rchinds.com. You're going to find a lot of information in there. There's a lot of articles that I write regularly to do with sometimes different topics which are in Think and Grow Rich, sometimes other topics to do with personal development. You can see testimonials in there, people who have done people who I've worked with before and some of the results they've got, other people in other mastermind groups I've worked in. Something else I've got which is really good, it's something which is called Freebie Friday. I know some people who are on the call have already signed up to this, but this is something which is free. I know how difficult it is when you haven't got positive people around you. So what I've devised is a campaign that once you subscribe to it, you'll be in it. And every Friday, you'll just get you'll get an email from me, which will have either a success tip on a video, or it might be a document, or it might be a download, but it will just be something to start to give you a positive edge. And if you're getting positivity on small regular basis, that can then start to make the difference, to then start to chip away at your old conditioning, and to really start to help you to start to put things together and start to achieve some really grand things in your life. So do make sure that you're signed up to that. That's www.rchinds.com/freebie Friday. You'll find a lot of blogs and a lot of articles on there with a lot of downloadable resources as well. And I do also coach people on different programs. I've got 5 programs, which these are Bob Proctor's programs. You won't find these on the website, but if you want any information on these, just do let me know. One program is for helping people to get more belief in themselves. One of them is for anyone who's involved with commission-based sales. It's just a really strong ways of being able to increase your sales. One is called Goal Achiever, which is helping you to set goals and knowing the difference between setting goals and achieving goals. Another one called Success Puzzle, another one called Born Rich. But if you ever want information about that, do ask me. For next week, if you could all read the preface and the introduction, which is everything at the front of the book up until you get to the chapter on desire. If you can, read the chapters twice, because the first time I always say read the first time for just to get a comprehension of it, and then the second time is when you can actually start to really study it. I'm going to be posting up the slides from this session into our Facebook group, so you can download it from there, and then you will start to see the recording as well. Over the next week, do start to think about what I said about your definiteness of purpose. Like, what is it that you want to achieve? Maybe what do you want to achieve over the next 12 months? Start thinking in 2015. What is it that you would like to achieve by December the 31st, 2015? Have you got one big thing that you'd like to achieve, or have you got a couple of things that you would really like to achieve? Start to think about your purpose and your vision. Now that I've given you a bit of a description about it, maybe something that you thought before, maybe it hasn't, but start to think about your purpose and your vision in your quiet moments, or maybe even dedicate some time each day to think about that. And for the next 7 days until we meet again, have a fantastic week. Really start to believe in yourself and just go out there and do great things. Now, but just anything that you do, you can do small things in a great way. You don't have to continually do big things, but just the small jobs that you're doing, whether you're washing up, whether you're washing your car, whether you're doing some filing, whether you're just sending some emails, but the small things, really focus on doing the small things well. And then that you'll see that the large things will then start to turn out well as well, because large things are just made up of doing small things well. You can concentrate on having a good a good activity. A couple of good activities will make a good day. A couple of good days will make a good week. A couple of good weeks will make a good month. A couple of good months will make a good year. So it's just really start to break it down. Just going to finish on a quote from Napoleon Hill. Now, Napoleon says, just as our eyes need light in order to see, our minds need ideas in order to conceive. Just as our eyes need light in order to see, our minds need ideas in order to conceive. So that just leaves me with this to say to you: keep reading, keep studying, and keep growing. Do visit the website, do get your copies of the book or the audio, and I shall see you in the Facebook group over the next week. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Like I say, apologies about the sound. And I will next week, I'll have that sound sorted out so we can start to get everybody speaking and really start to get to know each other. Okay, I shall see you next week, everybody. See you next week at 7:30 on a Monday night. Okay, have a great week, everyone. See you later. Bye.